This central bank just made a move that will shock everyone because now it's showing that they are panicking about the tariffs and inflation. The only one that hasn't made that move just yet is Jerome Powell. Is he holding strong with interest rates high? And is this going to bite him in the butt later on? We're going to get into all that. But first, let's talk about what just happened yesterday. And that's the Bank of England cutting interest rates. Now, it is interesting. There was expected, but as this article is saying, it's not good news for everybody. And I think it shows some concerns that people have globally that are not just in the United States. Rather, these banks are now cutting interest rates because they are worried about how the tariff effects. Well, somebody's got to buy some things, right? The United States, even though we're the #1 consumer economy here, well, if tariffs are making it nearly impossible to sell goods and services to the US, they got to sell them somewhere, right? So Europe is cutting, or excuse me, England is cutting their central bank rates for the first time. If you look at it as a normal trend, they're saying, hey, the mortgage payers, they're the winners because it's going to lower some of that fixed term mortgage. The losers are going to be bad because, or the losers are going to be the savers, excuse me, because you're just saving in a tax advantage account or a interest bearing account, which is very low. Small business owners are going to be benefited where retired people are going to lose it. But let's dive into it more because everybody is blaming all the tariffs, right? The Trump tariffs, the trade war, you can name it. Go on and on. You can see all the various headlines at what people are going to be pointing out. But on top of that, right, what we're seeing is the Bank of England cutting its main interest rates just a measly 25 basis points. So let's not get too crazy here. But two Bank of England policymakers unexpectedly opposed cutting rates. Now, why are they unexpectedly opposing cutting these interest rates? Well, there's maybe one or two reasons. One is they don't think the economy is in a poor spot, so no need to add excess liquidity. And the other is that they don't believe inflation is over just yet. And I'm going to dive into why Jerome Powell is doing that and, what we're seeing in the US in here just a little bit. So be sure to stick around. But either way, we're seeing tariffs expected to knock growth and push down UK inflation, allegedly, and the markets ditch bets on back-to-back May and June rate cuts. So now they're saying, hey, only one rate cut, and that's going to come now. So with that, right, the Bank of England, to tackle the expected hit from Donald Trump's tariffs, but a surprise three-way split among policymakers cooled expectations that it might speed up future moves. So two monetary policy members, I'm not even going to try to pronounce them, but Alan Taylor and Sawat Dhingra, I apologize for just butchering that like crazy, but either way, they voted for a bigger half-point cut. So we had some people that opposed it, some people that wanted it, but no economist polled by Reuters had expected any vote against the rate cut. But there was a vote against the rate cut, as we saw there earlier. The past few weeks have shown how unpredictable the global economy can be. That's why we need to stick to a gradual and careful approach to further rate cuts, right? So we're going to continue to see this. And the surprise vote sent the pound a little bit higher, right? I mean, we're always checking up the Dixie during this great live stream here. We'll check the Dixie and the S&P 500 later on, but what we're seeing is that the pound is actually increasing some strength. Since pounds and yield, the pound is actually increasing strength. Excuse me, sorry about that. The pound is increasing strength, and yields in the Bank of England are also increasing, right? So we kind of expect to see that. But the interesting aspect is we're looking at inflation, right? I mean, this is the Bank of England lowering their interest rates relative to however much inflation they believe they have. And look, the Bank of England isn't privy or isn't immune to lying, just like, the CPI prints that we see in the United States. I mean, what we see in the United States is just essentially moving of the stick farther and farther down the line, right? I mean, we see that, and I love to show you guys, if you guys have come to these live streams before, my favorite website's Govflation, because it shows how inflation and how data was presented previously back in 1982, previously, before we got off the gold standard. And if you look at this, right, here's what we get reported. We get 2.4. Then it's the real GDP, or CPI, excuse me, is 10.6. The real return is -6, even though we get told it's 1.45%. GDP, we're told, is growing, when in reality, it's shrinking, right? So, like, all of these different measurements that we get, just keep getting wider and wider apart, because they're saying, oh, we're evolving all this and that. We're going to change the way we look at different statistics. Well, the same is for the Bank of England, right? Like, all of these giant major governments manipulate the data, so you don't necessarily see the big underlying issues. Part of the big underlying issues is the underlying currency has faced massive amounts of inflation. We've had a ton of quantitative easing, ME, or QE, excuse me. But let's get back to the Bank of England. The higher interest rates have been working to slow down price rises over the past year. So cutting interest rates again today, 4.5, but inflation has been close to their 2% target from the peak of over 11%. And that's what they reported, right? They expect inflation to rise temporarily this year to 3.7. Because of higher energy prices, inflation is expected to fall back again to that 2% rate. So it's interesting, right? I mean, they're cutting interest rates even though they are expecting inflation to go up. But why hasn't Powell, and in fact, a lot of these other central banks, made a move just yet? I mean, we've seen it, right? If you look at the interest rates globally, Powell hasn't moved. The only one that's really moved is the Bank of England, seeing it go and decrease. But everywhere else, we're seeing interest rates relatively flat. Maybe the euro area, the ECB's cut a little bit back in April. But outside of that, we're not really seeing too many central banks move their interest rates, except for the Bank of England. Now, they're expecting these interest rates to now get or the tariffs, excuse me, to deeply affect their overall economy. But the interest rates that we've seen have kind of given, or the economy strength that we've seen is kind of given some people some fits, because some people agree that, the economy's okay and others don't. Now, if you look at the overall job market, right? I've gone over this in a couple different videos. The job openings are declining and there's slower hiring. And there's increased unemployment duration, but the unemployment rate is low. So, they're reporting the unemployment rate kind of as the ruse and telling people, hey, don't worry, everything is okay. We don't necessarily have to worry about all of this. And now we're seeing that the overall economy of the United States isn't all that it seems. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in here, right? We've already seen consumer confidence hit a low point. I reported that earlier this year, but it's the lowest level since November 22. So in the past 3 years, we haven't seen it get down to that level. And still, what are we seeing from the Fed? We are seeing just a 17% chance to cut interest rates. So the Fed is looking at this whole situation, the entire economy, and saying, to be honest, like, we don't really think it's that bad just yet. Like, shit isn't hitting the fan, which is interesting because Donald Trump is essentially warning Powell, yelling at him all the time, constantly. We need to cut rates. We need to cut rates. We need to cut rates. But Powell is remaining strong with all of this. And to be honest, he sees the underlying issues that many of us on Main Street see. And he's worried about the inflationary aspects of what cutting interest rates could do. And to be honest, I kind of agree with both sides here. I think what Trump is doing, you need to have some weakness in the market, because we've had a lot of fluff over the past 4 5 years because of, quite frankly, the cerveza sickness that my buddy George Gammon has coined, right? There's a reason why that we've seen that, right? And because of this, we're going to continue to see, the Dixie just flip flop in some strength. We're not going to see it make any single major moves here, but the Dixie has been relatively flat. It is over 100 now, so that is a positive sign. Glad to see that. But we are really looking to kind of see some more aspects of, this increase, right? We would like to see the Dixie, instead of being at 100, to then be a little bit closer to that 107, 108, maybe that all-time mark. But we're not there just yet. And we'll see how the market has been responding. The market was relatively flat today, responding to the Central Bank of England, or the Bank of England, excuse me, just cutting interest rates. We didn't really get much of a change. We got down 0.07, so it's basically flat this entire week. We've seen it basically go flat. So nothing groundbreaking here, especially with Jay Powell not making a move to cut interest rates. I think once we see Jay Powell make that move to cut interest rates, we're going to see things go bananas, right? But Powell is not going to be a leader in this. He's going to see, he's going to wait and see what other economies do, like the Bank of England, and he's going to see how their currency is affected, right? So he's going to be looking at all of this and really worrying about, or really keeping a close eye on how other economies are affected. Now, you see this giant period of holding the interest rates that the Bank of England previously had, right? So they're going to keep interest rates right where they like it, right there. And they're going to continue to gradually decrease the interest rates or cut those interest rates. Now, Powell knows that when you see this blue curve here of inflation, that isn't necessarily telling the whole truth and the whole story behind everything. So I think Powell is not a dummy. He realizes, like, hey, we're still fighting inflation, but the problem is all of this data is backwards looking. So we're going to continue to look at all of this backwards looking data and then make moves that would project forward. So I imagine, as we've always seen in the past, Powell's going to be a little bit too slow. But it's a wait and see game. We're going to have to wait and see. If this is your guys' first time joining me, hit that subscribe button with the bell notifications. I go live 4 to 5 times a week, and hit that like button for me. Start telling your friends to tell a friend. I'm doing a 1K subscriber challenge. I'm trying to get to 1K subscribers as fast as possible. Many of you might have already known me from my Green Candle channel, but if not, thank you guys all for tuning in, and I'll see you guys all at the next one.